All right, let's go ahead and get started today. Great to see so many people joining us from all over the world, from Cape Town, South Africa, to Czechia, to Tel Aviv, across Canada, Memphis, Miami, all over the US. Fantastic to have so many of you joining us from so many different places. My name's Chris Fair. I'm the president of Resonance, and joining me today is Tom Gierasimczuk, our VP Communications. And we have a special guest that's going to join us here to dive into some conversation around the future of AI. Stefan Hawes is the VP Global Marketing for Destination Vancouver. Stefan was one of the speakers at our Future AI Lab that we hosted at the Microsoft Innovation Center in advance of the City Nation Place conference last month. So he'll be joining to talk a little bit about this in real time and what his destination is going through and some of the challenges and opportunities they've discovered. And we will be taking questions from all of you. So as we go through the presentation, feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat, but do go into the Q&A and put your questions in there. We've got a good bit of time saved for that conversation. So if you want to pop those questions, particularly whether they're for myself or Tom or Stefan, we'll get to those in our conversation in a little bit. So the agenda that we're going to go through today is first just talking a little bit about the moment that we're in and why AI is one of the biggest, most significant disruptive forces we believe as it relates to place marketing. What we've tried to do and our work at Resonance is think about how do you evolve as a destination? How do we simplify? There are, of course, master classes on various platforms, all kinds of different conferences, etc. And what we realized coming out of our workshop with the 50 destinations that gathered at the Microsoft Innovation Center was that what people were looking for more than anything else was a framework, a simple roadmap. And we've taken everything out of the input that we received there to really come up with a three-step process. And that might sound like a bit of an oversimplification, and to some degree it is, but where we're at in this journey requires simplification. We're all overwhelmed with data, information, insights, etc. And we want to walk you through that process of how we think we can think about this in a manageable way and organize ourselves. Tom will be sharing some of the work as it relates to Show Up and how we think earned media and communications, owned media on your own platforms need to evolve as we move into this new B2Bot world. From there, we'll have that conversation with Stefan, and then we'll just wrap up with a little bit quickly around how Resonance is helping destinations work through their AI journey together. So let's get started. If you're not familiar with Resonance to date, we focus on strategic planning, branding, and marketing for destinations, cities, hotels, resorts. Everything we do at Resonance is focused on attracting talent, residents, or visitors to destinations and cities around the world. This will be our 20th year. We're based out of Vancouver, New York, and Brussels. And you may also be familiar with some of our best cities work. The worldsbestcities.com is one of the most cited platforms for rankings of cities. And we've actually taken a lot of what we've learned through our work in creating that content is helping us understand how we influence LLMs and the work that we're going to talk about today. Our work falls really into four buckets. Research, those best cities rankings. We do research on affluent travelers. We do research on different particular markets. Strategic planning as it relates to destination development, brand strategy, marketing strategy. And then we're taking those insights and that strategy and helping destinations articulate their identity. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as it relates to the importance of having a cohesive brand and story for your destination so that LLMs understand how to synthesize and how to talk about your particular place. And the last piece we do, which is most relevant to our conversation today, is around marketing. And of course, we see this as a major moment of disruption in the place marketing, destination marketing world, as we see the user moving quickly into these new platforms at a speed we've never seen other technologies adopted before. Just some of the clients that we work with from our perspective, and it's great to have people from all over the world joining us. We work with destinations across Canada, the US, Europe, Middle East, interesting cross-section of small communities and counties, ranging up to entire countries like England, Canada, Ireland, and Barbados. What I find most intriguing about this, or most exciting, is I think that we are in one of the most consequential moments of time in our careers. depending how old you are and where you started your career. This is certainly the most significant moment since the emergence of the internet. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is and why the speed of this new platform, this new transition that we're going through, is so much faster than anything we've seen before. I did my master's degree in studies of the future at the University of Houston many, many years ago. And one thing that stuck with me is something called Amara's Law. And I remember my professor, Peter Bishop, quoting this in the very first class we had and talked about Amara, who was a futurist with the SRI, Stanford Research Institute back in the 70s. And he said we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate it in the long run. And that often this is why we see speculative bubbles in the stock market, et cetera, because we're overestimating the effect of a new technology, whether that's the personal computer, whether that's the internet, whether that's the automobiles, if you go back in time. I think this little graphic for me kind of speaks to where we are at in the AI journey. I characterize this as our dial-up moment. For those of you that are old enough, you can really date yourself here. If you put in the chat if you ever had a dial-up modem where we had to actually unplug that phone cord, or you had it plugged into the phone and you plugged it into the back of a modem, and that was the key to getting onto the internet. And of course, America Online was one of the very first service providers, and you may have seen the You've Got Mail was the thing that we looked forward to when we turned on that computer. We got onto the internet. We had that screeching sound, and then of course somebody else would pick up a phone somewhere else in the house, and it would bump us off. We'd have to dial back on. This was a real slow process in terms of ramping up how the internet was going to change and shape travel because we simply didn't have the hardware, the pipeline, the speed. It took many, many years for us to get the hardware in place to people's homes around the world to be able to have decent speed internet access. And I think that's the big difference this time. And we'll talk a little bit why AI is moving so much faster and why it's influencing travel and tourism so much faster than the internet did 25 years ago. The first little stat that we're probably all familiar with is just the adoption of ChatGPT. So this reached 100 million users in the first 60 days, and you can kind of see, it took Netflix 3.5 years to get there, it took Instagram 2.5 years, took TikTok 9 months. But this was really just the very early beginnings of the adoption of AI. Where we are today, as of February 2026, a couple of months ago, ChatGPT has 900 million weekly active users. So you look at that, incredible to go from 100 million just in the first 60 days, but now there are 900 million weekly active users. And there are 2.5 billion prompts being submitted just in ChatGPT alone every single day. And it's become the fourth most visited website globally, ahead of Wikipedia, ahead of X. And 10% of the global adult population, this is almost a year ago, so we assume that we'll get some more recent numbers. I would assume that this is getting closer to 15-20% of the global adult population is using AI search on a weekly basis. So there is this rapid shift in how we discover places underway. Our audiences haven't changed, but the pathway that they're using to discover your destination, even if it is still going into Google, it's largely being replaced with those AI summaries that sit at the top. And there's lots of statistics there on how people are not scrolling down the page. They're not clicking 27 different links to do their investigation. They're letting AI do the work for them through either that AI summary that Gemini creates in Google or going into other platforms like ChatGPT or increasingly Claude, Perplexity, etc. I think this is particularly important for the travel and tourism sector. This is some research from McKinsey of just looking at across different types of categories, which ones are AI using the most for. And you can see consumer electronics at the top, grocery second, travel and hospitality is third. So we're really at the forefront in terms of, as a category, of what platforms people are using for what they're searching for within the AI world. So here, I think we think about Amara's law of, yes, we're probably underestimating the long-term future. When the internet came out, we overestimated it. We had a whole dot-com crash. But of course, the Googles and the Amazons and many of the companies that were born in that time have now gone on to become some of the largest companies in the world. But it took 25 years. And this time, we're seeing rapid adoption of the platform and this rapid shift. And that's showing up in declines of 30 to 40% web traffic to many destinations' websites. We've seen that AI platforms have tripled their share of travel research just in the last 6 months. I mean, even public companies like TripAdvisor are coming out and saying that organic search now is going to account for less than 10% of their bookings moving forward. So it's disrupting their entire company. And I think one of the key takeaways, if you take nothing else away from this presentation today, is that there is no time to wait, that organizations that are kind of waiting for this to mature are losing ground in real time. What we did learn out of the AI FutureLab with the various destinations there is that most have just begun this journey, just dipped their toe in the water. So if you're feeling that, hey, I'm not up to speed on all of this, that's why you're joining this webinar. The good news is you're not very far behind. That most destinations are very early into this journey. A few like Destination Vancouver that we're going to hear from in a moment are a little bit more ahead, and that's why we wanted to have Stefan join us. But we want to give everybody some level of comfort that we're all in this boat together. It's very early in the journey, but you can't start too soon. And I think that's why we look at this as the whole playbook has changed. And when we look at this list, even though we sort of see red X's along the current model, it's not to suggest that we stop doing all of these things. We actually need to continue to do these, and we have a whole new mandate over on the right. So when we thought about the current model or the model that developed with the internet over the last 25 years is we created destination websites. Those became kind of the primary information hub for your destination or your city if you're in economic development. We controlled that narrative through the media we created, through the campaigns that we created. We decided what the message was going to be, and we pushed that out across our earned and paid channels. And then we divided organic search traffic. We tried to keyword optimize it so that we would show up for those searches, lots of hashtags, keyword meta tags, sorry. Looking at that was very much a tactical exercise. We sent out press releases to journalists, influencers, tried to, fam trips to get them to come in. And then, of course, as all social media emerged, we had all these different channels to manage, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc., that we use to inspire people. And if you go way back in time, if I started my career before the internet, we were actually, making brochures, setting up 1-800 numbers, mailing out 500,000 lodging guides, and getting people to call a particular 1-800 number to be able to book their travel and vacations. So that's certainly gone by the wayside in terms of at least the brochure part. We still have telephone bookings today. So I think that helps illustrate the fact that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Some of these legacy channels continue to exist, but now we have all of these new mandates and responsibilities that you see on the right, that we have to understand what AI is saying about the destination, and then we have to figure out how to influence it. And this is a whole different level of influence and different tactics and strategies. We need to build authority across third-party sources. So it's not just our own channels now. We have to look at the channels that the LLMs are referencing and look at how we build authority across those platforms. We need to make sure that we're optimizing our content to not just be ranked by Google, but to be cited. How do you show up in those AI summaries? And we need to look at how we manage our presence as a destination across all of these different platforms. You'll see, Reddit is something that's showing up as one of them. So we can't control all that messaging in Reddit or Wikipedia, but we can participate in that. And of course, everything is changing in real time. So how you're monitoring and responding to the shifts in these platforms is something that we're working on. Could be different a year from now. So let's talk through kind of the 3 steps to your AI future. I'll get us started here on the first step and turn it over to Tom here in a moment. I think what's important to kind of note is to think about we have this new intermediary, and this was out of Megan Ferrigino's presentation. She's the Chief Analytics Officer for Destination Canada. And she talked a little bit about how this machine is now in the middle of every relationship that matters, whether that's B2B from a trade perspective, whether it's B2C, that we now have to think about this new arbitrator that is digesting our content, digesting all sorts of other sources, and making recommendations to the audience. So from now, we have to think about not just being B2B from a trade perspective and B2C with the consumers, is that we also have this B2Bot intermediary that we need to deal with. And that's not to say that the other ones get replaced. I look at this as another layer that we need to think about in our marketing and communications strategy. We talked a lot, if any of you were at the Tempest Tourism Academy in Jacksonville a couple weeks ago. Great information there. SEO, we understand it. And this is not to suggest, I think one of the key messages there was that geo doesn't replace SEO. SEO is actually the foundation for good generative engine optimization. So I think it's really important, again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that we are thinking about maintaining a lot of the tactics, the strategies that we used to drive clicks to our website is still foundational to generative engine optimization. And what we're looking for here is to be included in the synthesized answers that AI creates. If somebody's going in and asking ChatGPT, what are the best places for a bachelorette party in the Southeast? How is your destination showing up? Do you want to show up for that particular query is also a question. And there are a variety of different ways for you to influence how that algorithm digests and makes those recommendations. So the roadmap that we're going to talk about today really is kind of the three steps, and this is really the synthesis that came out of the workshop. Was step one really is just about showing up. How are we understanding the visibility of your destination to these various platforms, whether that's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, etc., that all of our audiences are now using, and how do we improve our visibility? So we'll talk a little bit about why that's important, some ideas in terms of how to measure that, and then two, how to influence that. The second stage really then is thinking about how AI can affect your organization. How do you build the capacity, the governance to manage all of these new tools? And that's something that Janet Rausch talked a lot about from Brand USA in the workshop of just how the emergence in these early days of shadow AI, that there's lots of people in the organization that are maybe using AI with personal accounts, free accounts, etc. We need to get control of that from a governance perspective. And then we also need to think about AI as not in our industry in particular, not so much as a force replacement, that we're not looking at AI as replacing people's jobs. We're looking at how is it empowering people to do more or to do different things, that AI can be a force multiplier for the teams within destination marketing organizations. And the last piece we'll talk about and really get into a conversation with Stefan on is around stepping forward of what does the future look like? We spent a lot of time talking about agentic AI. Will travelers go in, make a query, let AI book their entire trip for them? We're probably several years away from that happening at a large scale, but it is something we need to be thinking about and preparing for. I think the important part of having a framework here that we're trying to do today is just to give you a roadmap and a path. Step one is really just about protecting you from disappearing. That if your search traffic is going down, people are getting answers and recommendations in other channels. Let's make sure that your destination shows up for the appropriate queries in the appropriate places. Step two is really about, as I said, increasing the capacity of you and your team, of looking at the implementation of AI in your organization as that force multiplier, not force replacement. And step three is really just about let's preparing for that future that we don't yet understand, that we're probably underestimating today, and thinking about how we will probably shift and change our organizations as a result of the influence and power AI is going to have over how people make their purchasing decisions and actually transact for travel and tourism in the future. So most destinations, as said, the good news is if you're feeling overwhelmed, is most destinations we learned in the workshop are really just in step one. Many, in fact, have not even started. They might be working with their digital web company who's doing some analytics, et cetera, trying to understand how they're showing up, but very few, other than our speakers, organizations at the workshop, had an AI strategy. So you're not alone. A few organizations are kind of leading the way with step two and actually looking at how do they create new roles, responsibilities, what are the things that humans should be doing less of, that the machine is able to do, and what are the things that humans should be doing more of, or what is the bandwidth that we're creating? And Stefan will talk a little bit about that. And then what we realized also is that step three, nobody is operationally ready for step three of what the agentic future looks like. This is going to be something that will unfold over time, but something that we need to prepare for. So I think the question that we need to be asking ourselves, or what came out of the workshop, is not, are you doing AI well? Frankly, nobody is doing it well. The question is just understanding and having a conversation. What step are you in? What stage are you in this journey? And what's the first move that you need to make? There's no need to do everything all at the same time. We can kind of think about this as building stepping stones. And depending on where you are in your journey, determines what the next move is that you should take. So let's talk about the steps. Step one is really just about showing up, about becoming visible to the algorithm in the channels that your audiences are now using. And I think, what we've digested or tried to synthesize here is your AI presence is really being determined and shaped by five different forces. One is your own content. So your destination marketing organization or your economic development organization or your hotel resorts, your website, the content you're creating is being ingested by LLMs, but it's typically not the most referenced source. LLMs are referencing much more earned media, third-party citations from what they consider to be trusted sources. So whether that's TripAdvisor, New York Times, could be Reddit in many cases. So earned media is becoming a more powerful force in terms of influencing not just B2C in terms of consumers, but those B2Bot channels. The third is really about having the right structured data, taking your content and having schema markups, the FAQs you're all seeing appear, et cetera. There are some tactics to ensuring that the data and the content that you've created is legible to the machines. We've done some audits for different destinations, and we can see, very different levels of visibility. Some destinations have people in-house that have done a good job of understanding this, and so this is a piece of work to be done and then maintained over time. The fourth piece is really just about community story and alignment that unlike, let's say, Google search, if I put in something, best places to go on vacation in Palm Springs, it would largely Google would reference sites that were about vacations. The difference with LLMs, if I put in Palm Springs, is it might be pulling things from all kinds of different sources that are not related to travel and tourism. So the scope of influence is much, much broader. So trying to get alignment, we'll talk a little bit about that later, amongst different partners. Are your different partners saying the same things? Or if you're saying conflicting things, as is often the case, we're potentially confusing the LLMs in terms of the recommendations it makes. And the last piece then is just about monitoring, benchmarking, and understanding where your visibility is. How is that changing over time? Are there new channels emerging? And Tom will share a couple examples of that from our AI visibility audit that we've done for some destinations so far. So why is this important? We already talked about, the traffic being in decline, but the audience didn't leave. It's just changed its behavior. As I mentioned, actual visits to Google have skyrocketed. They're up significantly, but clicks are down. And that's because of the AI overview. Those synthesized answers are really replacing all of the clicking that was happening down below the page. I think one of our challenges now is that this is happening, and unlike with the internet and with Google, or we had Google Analytics, there is no platform now. There is no measurement system that is accessible to DMOs. There are various different platforms, hacks, workarounds, tools. We've created one ourselves. Stefan at Destination Vancouver has created on other platforms. This will continue to evolve, but we do need to come up with a way of measuring and monitoring where the queries are going, what people are looking for, and which ones are actually converting to interest to our websites. So I think what's important to note here is that if your destination isn't in the answer, then you're not even being considered. You already mentioned that TripAdvisor has already stated that organic search is now going to deliver less than 10% of their gross booking value moving forward. So they're having to develop, new channels, new strategies. AI summaries now are appearing in about half of those Google searches, and when they do, click through to websites drops by nearly half. So there is a very clear correlation between that AI summary at the top and then your behavior afterwards. Most people are not scrolling down the page. So long story short, you need to be in those answers if you want to be considered as a destination. And the last piece I'll leave on before I kind of turn this over to Tom to dive a little deeper is I think that we need to now think about earned media as not just a campaign, the way we think about it from a B2C perspective. What was the value of that earned media? How many impressions did we make? Thinking about it as advertising or a replacement for advertising. We need to now think about earned media really as infrastructure, as foundational to how your destination is going to show up, because this is what the LLMs are increasingly using to create those synthesized answers. We also see lots of different statistics here. I think one of them is, really thinking about just a story in a major travel title does more for your AI standing than 100 pages of own content. So yes, we need to go and create the content. We need to make sure it's organized, the machines are legible. But the real wins are when you get different titles to write a story. And sometimes doesn't have to be New York Times. We'll share an example here of a blogger we discovered that's heavily influential in Michigan, for example, one of the top 10 referenced sources. So for some destinations, actually, there's a lot of opportunity and low-hanging fruit with travel titles, bloggers, influencers that may not be some of those marquee titles that we're all familiar with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom to talk a little bit more about, from a communications perspective, how he sees this evolving and the importance of earned and owned media. Tom?
Thanks, Chris. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll walk you through the importance of finding and sharing your destinations, unique attributes and advantages, and really aligning around them. As Chris pointed out, the importance of this is just a reminder at this point that AI serves up homogeneity, the most probable outcome. And the antidote to a generic summary is your destination's special sauce. So, what is uniquely authentic and true about your place is really the only thing that survives a summarizer or a summary. And before we get to the next slide, I want to give you some recent context here at the new Google I/O conference just days ago. Google basically doubled down on their summary future. So Gemini 3.5 Flash became the new default in AI mode. And Google now is basically fully reimagined AI and gotten rid of the 10 blue links that, we all know and loved, or maybe hated, I don't know. But that 30 to 40% traffic drop that Chris showed before, that's just the beginning. The trajectory is heading in the wrong direction for any destination that's still optimizing only for traditional search. Another Google signal with massive implications is called personal intelligence. And what happens is when turned on, Gemini can pull from a user's Gmail, Google Photos, YouTube history, and search history to really personalize the answers in a way that it's never has before. So subscribe, for example, to a newsletter from Lynchburg, Virginia. Ask Gemini about history-packed weekends in Virginia for family, and then Gemini can weigh the Lynchburg, upward and elevate it because it has access to your inbox, and that relationship already exists. So, I mean, just incredible amounts of changes that are coming, and the need for that distinct message and to actually be accepted by your target audience in advance is going to help tremendously. So if you look at the next slide here, is what is the sort of specificity and the importance of that and that distinction of your destination. It's really, as Chris mentioned, it's powered by owned media and earned media. So both have just taken on a second dimension of value. You can say the newsletter, you've been kind of quietly questioning the ROI of, is now a training signal for a model that will recommend travel to that subscriber, as I just talked about. So if you look at the four boxes on this slide, they're a simple guide to consider for your marketing and content output. So what do locals not stop talking about? Really finding that and elevating it. What surprises first-time visitors when your visitor surveys? Really finding that out and digging into it and creating a content calendar around that. What stories can only your community tell, right? It's again that going back and getting away from that homogeneity and looking really at the special sauce of your destination and what specificity can no other destination genuinely replicate. So all of these things are, we've all done them. Successful destinations have done them, but now they matter more than ever way upstream in that discoverability phase. So then you look at the next slide here, and then this is also a reminder to restructure content for machine ingestion. So once you know what's specifically true about your place, you have to feed it into the machine in a way that the LLMs and the algorithm can read. So, how do you do that? Just some examples here. Try leading with the answer. AI models scan for direct answers. So the first, 150 words of any high intent page has to stand on its own. FAQ structures and schema markups on every key page are a good idea. We talked to somebody at the AI lab last month, and her destination they just didn't have the budget to completely LLMize, their website. And so what did they do? On the highest ranking and most engaging pieces of content, they just added a frequently asked question page, and that's really working well for them. So it doesn't have to be this seismic reinvention of what you're doing. It's these small hacks that can help as well. Also, looking at signal recency, this idea of refreshing your top pages and adding explicit last updated dates, just because a page, dated 2026 beats a stronger page dated 2022 most of the time. And we're seeing that, as Chris mentioned, in our World's Best Cities and Best Cities programming. The fact that we've been doing them since 2016, yeah, that's right, 10 years now. And so that idea of being consistent with updated data means that after this masterclass, you can go and ask your LLM of choice, what are the best cities in Europe? What are America's best cities? What are the best cities in the world? And across the board, you'll see Resonance's Best Cities program because of that consistency, which really speaks to this point. The last one here is publishing comparisons. So this idea of X versus Y framing shows up disproportionately in AI answers, because that's how people ask questions. So putting yourself in your target audience's sort of search mind is invaluable at this point. So the next slide here looks at just this idea that the methodology and the framework, and there's 1,000 different ways to look at how your destination can show up. Chris mentioned there's our service, there's a bunch of others, and there's more coming online every single day. But this particular slide walks through how we measure it. And when Google launched analytics, as Chris said, there's a whole entire ecosystem of free data that was available. But when it comes to the LLMs, they're not disclosing anything. You've got to build your own measurement. And again, it's a dark art. It's not 100% accurate, not like Google Analytics was, not even close. So the way that we do it is 4 geographic frames really mirror how real travelers frame their search. For Ann Arbor, a client of ours, we identified Michigan as the home state, near Detroit as this regional gateway, college towns as the strongest national identity frame, and the Midwest as the broadest competitive set, where you're up against, Chicago, Indianapolis, Cleveland, obviously Ann Arbor thinks about those destinations as competitors. There's also 6 travel intent types that we identified, and they capture why someone is searching. So food, outdoors, arts and culture, conferences, sporting events. weekend trips. And a destination shows up very differently across these. So then looking at what we measure and relative to our destination audit for the AI audits that we conduct for clients, there's four metrics that carry the load. One is AI visibility score, which captures how often and how prominently the destination shows up. It's our primary KPI. There's a sentiment. Sentiment is really an underrated one. So if you appear in every answer as a solid option, while one of your competitors appears as a top pick, you're losing the booking. And this is scored from 0 to 100, and neutral being at 50. Anything above 60, we find is doing well. Search volume is really a prioritization layer here. So 70% score on a prompt with 200 searches matters less than 35% on a prompt with 800,000 searches. So we model the volume so decisions land against actually real volume and a real impact. And then brand mentions. So every venue, neighborhood, operator in your destination, as well as competing cities, the AI surfaces alongside you or instead of you. So this really is a competitive intelligence layer. So if you look at the next slide here, we're looking at a prompt construction. So this is a snapshot of the scale of the work. So we've got 4 geographies times 6 travel types that I just mentioned, 3 prompt variations per combination across 6 AI platforms. So it's a lot of numbers, but that gives you 432 unique responses per AI audit that we do for a single destination. And then just wanted to share the 3 example prompts here from our Ann Arbor study. So those, and you'll see actually how it looks in the dashboard in a second, but this one was best cities in Michigan for food and dining. So the home state and then the food as an interest. Best weekend trips from Detroit. So geographically regional gateway, and then the experience being the weekend. And then best college towns for attending a college football game, national identity combined with a sporting event. So if you go to the next slide here, this is what an actual dashboard looks like. So Ann Arbor's discovery phase summary is 72 prompts, 4 geographies, 6 travel types, 5 AI platforms. Obviously, you can't just double down on 1 or 2. And the average visibility, about 31%. It's really solid for a mid-sized destination. And Ann Arbor shows up in roughly 1 of every 3 AI responses where it should. Relevant search volume is 19 million per month. So that's sort of the baseline that we're pulling from. But here, I think the devil is really in the details. So by geography, college towns is strongest at 48%. University of Michigan identity, Michigan and near Detroit are about in the mid 30s. And then Midwest is 5.4%. You can't sugarcoat this. Chicago crushes Ann Arbor in that frame. But again, it's important to see that. So by travel type, sporting events lead at 42.5. The Michigan football story obviously is huge. Arts and culture and food both perform well. Conferences and weekend trips have room to grow. Outdoor and nature, however, at 9.8%, there's a clear gap there. The Huron River, the trails, the nature areas, they're just not showing up. So, talk about an earned media and content brief opportunity. It's right there. So looking at the next slide here, this is where the strategy gets interesting. If you look at the top cited domains for Ann Arbor, Reddit, as Chris mentioned, is an absolute must for engagement and discoverability. So no surprise there at 49%. AnnArbor.org, the DMO site, is at almost 37%, which is very, very solid for a DMO site as a source of truth. Then you look at Michigan.org, the city government site is at just over 16%. Then Facebook, U of M Business School, Botanical Gardens, and a niche local creator at 11%, as well as a realtor at 10%. So you look at something like this, and it again, it's a gold mine for your communications and marketing strategy. What's not on this list are the New York Times, Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast. So for a destination of Ann Arbor size, the mainstream travel press isn't the citation engine. Reddit is, right? The DMO site is. And then like this long tail of local creators and niche bloggers. So for smaller and mid-sized destinations, the earned media playbook basically has to invert. So New York Times placement still matters, but for AI visibility, 10 placements with a regional blogger and local journalists with strong domain authority, like in this case, followthepiper.com. It moves the needle a lot more. It's also a lot cheaper and easier to engage with these locals to basically work with you. So this idea that AI search makes PR less valuable is couldn't be more wrong. I think generative search is an opportunity for this rebirth of PR and earned media, as Chris talked about. PR basically picks up sources to trust before the user sees a response, and the inputs it uses are the exact inputs that PR was built to create. So, one of the things that I'll hand it over to Chris now is looking at what the importance of talking as a unified voice. So you know who is actually where your destination is appearing, and the next step here is to make sure that that story is actually unified because fracture story is actually more dangerous potentially than no story at all. So Chris, I'll throw it back to you.
Right. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, I think as you can see, I think we're fascinated by this moment in time of how really communications earned media is really the primary driver of the recommendations being made in LLMs. But it also now makes our job a lot more difficult of how do we control that narrative? How do we think about having a shared identity? At Resonance, we've done numerous civic identity projects, whether that's with Baltimore, Brussels, Houston, etc. And now seeing the power of having a shared narrative is not just around having different organizations singing off the same song page. It's now really become an AI strategy as it relates to ensuring that the recommendations and how LLMs understand your destination is consistent. So there's a need for a lot more participation, not one brand per se, but one story and messaging playbook that brings the DMO, the EDO, the Chamber of Commerce, civic leaders, and various creators and influencers together. And I think DMOs are actually best positioned as communicators and facilitators to convene that. And in the civic brand identity projects that we've worked on, it's typically been the DMO that's leading that charge. So that's step one, which is a lot. And we spent a lot of time just talking about understanding visibility, how to show up, how to benchmark and monitor it. We'd be happy to have offline conversations and get into deeper detail on that. I think now step two is really thinking about, well, what is AI and what does AI mean to you as an organization? And I think this is, if we think about step one is really how you're showing up in the external environment. Step two is really about, well, how are we operating and managing AI internally? And there isn't a one size fits all solution. I think each organization needs to think about and understand what do they want to be in the world of AI and what does that mean? I think there's several questions that you can ask. One is what your role is in your community's AI story. If you're a small organization with two or three people, you may not have the bandwidth to be that convener. Perhaps it's another organization. If you are a mid-sized, larger DMO, perhaps it is your role to be the convener, the connector of authoring your community's story for the purposes of influencing and showing up in AI. I think you have to have a conversation and, ask yourselves as an organization, what your posture is and position towards the technology. Are you striving to be an early adopter and a leader? Are you a fast follower? Or some destinations are being deliberately skeptical about AI. There are no guarantees that this, maybe we've already maxed out the number of users and the people that will use LLMs. I don't believe that to be true, but we should consider both opposing points of view and have a position as an organization of how vested and how fast we are going to move so that everyone's on the same page and you don't have people within your organization moving at different speeds. And I think that then brings up sort of the relationship between AI and the people who do the work. I think there's generally, we actually saw that a lot of younger people are more resistant to AI. You would think it would kind of be the opposite, but we learned out of the workshop that there is a fair bit of skepticism, particularly for people coming right out of school, where they were taught not to use AI. But having that conversation as an organization in terms of what your relationship with AI is, what you see AI doing, and what do you see people doing is really important. I think another question is also asking, what are we unwilling to do with AI, even if we could? What are the standards that you're setting? There was lots of discussion in the lab around AI augmented imagery. At what point do we cross a line where we're presenting images that are not real or representative of the destination? In fact, a lot of research has been shared, and I do believe that this will evolve over time, that the more AI generated content and imagery we see, the more human generated, down to earth type content that's authentic and real to the community will become more valued. So I think right now we're in a little bit of a moment where we're using AI. It's a fun new tool and toy that you can influence, but there will be a counter trend to that and a demand for more human content. I think last is setting some of the KPIs of like what will you be measuring 3 years from now as an organization to know whether you got this right? Is it around, visibility? It can be obvious metrics, but there can also be other more softer metrics that we think about as it relates to the things that your people and your organization might be able to take on new responsibilities as it relates to stewardship, as it relates to storytelling, as it relates to being that convener. Setting those objectives, I think, are really important, and a lot of AI strategy documents are kind of missing that right now. So if we kind of like recap or just sort of think about the steps within step two, I think one is what Stefan calls having an AI North Star is a good way of framing that. What do we want to be in the world of AI? Two is having to create an AI council, some sort of cross-functional committee that meets to set policy, approve tools, create that connection between the various departments who are likely using AI in different ways within your organization. Adding another level of bureaucracy is nothing that anyone seems to embrace or enjoy, but there really is a need here because people are approaching AI on a departmental basis with different needs, different desires, different outcomes. How do we bring that together? Which really is an entree into tech stack audit in step three, which is, which platforms are you using officially? How are you getting everybody onboarded? I think that was one of the things out of the lab is, fundamentally is just getting everybody an account on whatever platform you're using, so that they're not using free accounts, then that you don't have this shadow AI developing, that all of that is staying within your organization. It's owned by your organization, and you have policies for all of the content and the knowledge that's going to develop across your organization as it uses particular AI platforms. The next step we can start to get into is thinking about process mapping. What are the things that you're doing today within your organization that could be simplified by AI? And I actually think as we think about agentic AI and we think about consumers booking tickets and making recommendations using LLMs, I actually think there's probably in the near term more opportunity for us to look within our organizations and different processes, and perhaps there are agents that we could be creating to handle tasks, processes that will actually free up time and capacity within our own teams. The next is having an AI or roadmap. What does the future of the organization look like? Are there some roles that will shift, change, evolve? Will the organization need to be altered? We'll talk about that here with Stefan in a second, and in terms of how you manage that process. So I think step three is really thinking about what that future of the organization looks like. So we don't have a crystal ball to say what we think that will look like. We have this thought that our organizations will have more capacity as machines take on certain tasks. There'll be more human time. What do we do with that time? And what will the organization look like? If content now becomes really fundamental to driving LLMs, do we break down the silos between content for trade, content for meetings and events, content for consumers? Now there might just be content. So with that, I wanted to invite Stefan Hawes to kind of really talk about how he's seen AI evolve within their organization at Destination Vancouver. Welcome, Stefan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Thanks for including me today.
So you were one of our speakers at the AI lab, and I think you talked a lot about how you saw AI shaping the future of the organization, this, step three, et cetera. But before we get into that, really wanted you to maybe touch on your experience. If you went back to stage one and thinking about AI, what has your organization gone through, and what are some of the takeaways as it relates to just showing up in the LLM's recommendations and all of these synthesized answers?
Great, Chris. Yeah, I think I think all of this can be kind of overwhelming, and I'm sure there's a few people on the call today that feel overwhelmed by it. And I know I sometimes wake up and go, "Oh my God, it's all overwhelming," because AI, is often called a general purpose technology, right? It can hit everything within your organization, and everything can be impacted by AI. So where do you start? And um, when you can do everything, it makes it very difficult to do anything sometimes. And one of the things I've thought was good is to just kind of break it down into two areas, right? As a travel organization, it's important that as the travel journey has changed, that we look at it and understand it from a marketing perspective and all the things we're doing externally. And then there's the internal. And sometimes in the conversation, those two things start to get muxed together, whereas they need to be treated as two separate things. There's how we're going to change our visibility in the world and how we change as a marketing organization as a result of AI. And then there's the how do we change how we operate as an organization fundamentally. And I think that the approach that you've taken here with step one, two, and three makes a lot of sense in saying step one, kind of start with that territory of external because that's something that's more manageable. It's a kind of thing that you can break off and deal with yourself. And then step two being, how do we change as an organization? How do we evolve and restructure? And then step three, how do we build for the future? And where does the organization need to be going? There's that saying that people love to use, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But sometimes you need to do both. And sometimes you need to deliver those short-term wins, and sometimes you need to be building the long-term structure for your organization. So I think that's great. For your step one things, I think you and Tom both hit on the key themes that we've really hit on. I think the only thing that I would add to what you were really talking about there is just that it can be a lot of work. And I think Tom was referencing that, finding some quick wins, don't have to do everything all at once, but it is a lot of work. And, we were early into the AI space. We built a chatbot as quickly as we could, and we learned a lot, but we also took the hits as a result of that, the challenges that knocked down on a lot of our organic traffic, which drove us to be doing a lot of these steps over the past year and a half. And it's been a long journey to try and improve our content because we took a big hit early on. And because we took that big hit early on, and we've done that year and a half of work, that's why we're in a really great spot. But make no mistake, we've brought in external contractors. We've worked extensively with our agencies to try to improve all of our content so that we can be a leading GEO organization now. So it can't be understated how much work that is.
No.
Um,
Well,
Go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was going to ask you about sort of, do you think about so you guys have, been kind of leading in that step one, show visibility, content, et cetera, doing all of that work. As you think about kind of step two in the organization, like how have people within your DMO been receptive to AI? I imagine there's people moving at different speeds, different levels of interest. How have you guys kind of organized that and developed a culture around AI within Destination Vancouver?
Uh, I think we have a pretty positive connection and relationship with AI as far as an organization that's been trying to lead and help our teams understand what they could do with AI for probably 2 years now plus. But just like anything within an organization, so much of it comes from the top, right? We have a CEO who has been very positively predisposed to us learning and leading and has been experimenting and exploring the tools and using AI for the past couple of years. And I think it's that willingness to support it and speak openly with the team about the fact that we're going to be using these tools. I think that's just possibly the most important thing is that demonstration of engagement and connection with the tools. That, and there are always going to be people that don't want to have anything to do with this. And perhaps even more so recently as AI has become less popular from a public perception standpoint. There will certainly be barriers, but the technology is not going away and is such a transformative tool for our organizations that we need to keep exploring and trying. And I think that we continue to have people that want to be a part of our council and exploring and trying new tools. I think the other thing is about finding ways that it makes it relevant for everybody, right? It's about finding use cases that are relevant for someone in the sales organization or in the marketing organization or in the media or travel trade groups. You got to find all those different use cases that can make it day-to-day useful for the team.
You know, one of the things you had in your presentation at the AI Lab that I thought was maybe a powerful frame for people was sort of showing that these are the things that machines will do, these are the things that humans will do. Can you talk a little bit about how you've kind of framed that and communicated that amongst your team and what that means for you guys as a DMO?
Absolutely. I mean, it's this is a long journey, but it's also an incredibly short journey, right? The technological transformation is happening, and if you pay attention to all the AI conversation, sure, AGI might be 5 years out still, but the impact of the tools that are here today is still significant. I think there's two things. One, none of us have had actually less to do with in our lives right now as a result of AI. In fact, AI has massively increased the amount of work that we have to do right now. I have entire days that are taken up with AI conversations. And that was a whole day that I used to have in my life to actually do the other things that are all part of my job. So there's this dramatic increase in amount of work that we've had, but the expectation, the reason why we're doing this is because there's an expectation that there's a curve, and then at some point this delivers what we've been talking about as the capacity dividend, the dividend that it's going to feed back to us. But one thing that any DMO that's on the call here, I am very confident none of us feel we have enough resources to do all the things we want to do as an organization. So it's about having that future vision of, if I am given 25 to 40% of capacity back across my teams, where is it that we want to use that? The idea of humans at the edge, that we're going to create a core of things that can be done as an organization that can be automated through AI, that can simply be delivered for us. A lot of which was the things that took a lot of time for us in the past. Once that's delivered for us, it's about people at the edge that are doing what's actually really important for the DMOs, such as building relationships with key stakeholders. For us as a destination, it's about the reconciliation with our indigenous nations. It's about more personal sales relations. It's about working with destinations looking to come to town or going out and actually meeting more contacts. That's what it should be enabling, is humans doing what humans do best and leaving the machines to do what the machines can do.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of framing that and helping people kind of understand that, AI is not a threat, it's an opportunity to do more meaningful work, actually, in terms of some of the roles and responsibilities that will emerge. Let's
Absolutely.
talk about step three, like as we're kind of really getting into the future here of how you think the organization will change. LLMs don't see a trade channel, a consumer channel. How were you thinking about what the future of content and the work that a DMO does might evolve or change, and how might that change the structure of the organization?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. This is the conversation we're currently having and starting to have, and as you look at what's a future org structure, when content and how we speak about ourselves is going to be the primary thing that is surfaced externally when one wants to plan any sort of, whether it's incentive travel, meetings and conventions, leisure travel, all of that is really going to be driven by agents at one end trying to find out what the best solutions are for whatever the thing is that they need. And so how do we have a consistent story that we tell, and what is the distribution model for us as an organization? And when we start looking at that, it breaks down all of the silos within the organization, or maybe it doesn't break them down, but really builds them around a single focused content machine. And I really like some of the comments that Tom made earlier today about the things that are so important around content. And if you take that to its natural extent and say, if I didn't already have an organization that was structured the way it is, how would I build a new content machine as a DMO? And how would that deliver for us in the future? And that leads us to an entirely different org structure with different sort of lines of reporting as an organization to be almost AI native DMO rather than a DMO that's kind of attaching AI onto the side.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating journey. I really believe we're sort of just in the whichever metaphor you want to use, early innings, first period, et cetera. But I mean, this journey is just begun, and the speed of it is only going to accelerate. Which is creates both opportunities, but friction and challenges for organizations. Is there anything that you're doing or parting words of wisdom as you think about how DMOs should think about the speed and pace by which they should be adopting and investing in AI?
Yeah, my parting words would really be around, we end up having so many conversations about AI, but the most important thing for us is to take care of our people. Making sure that they're constantly being trained, upskilled, so that they know that they're part of this future that we're all building as organizations. Education and training within our organization, so they know that they're also a part of this journey as an organization. And finally, communication with our teams, the transparency and the sharing the vision with them about how we see that we can all be having better organizations for everyone, I think is as important as any AI strategy or technology plan.
Right. People first. Love it. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you providing some real world context. I'm sure others, people have questions. We'll be happy to make some connections to Stefan for anyone that's joining us here today. And we'll continue the conversation because I know this journey's just begun. Thanks, Stefan.
Thanks, Chris.
So just to wrap up, I know we're a little bit over time here, but briefly, one last slide. Just as you're thinking about your AI journey, really happy to help you explore that. You saw some snapshots of the AI place audit, the work that we've done for, as an example, for Ann Arbor. You can reach out to us. That's something that we're doing for destinations for free, just helping them really understand a little bit and then analyze where are you, what is your visibility. And of course, then that can lead into an ongoing relationship where we're benchmarking, monitoring your visibility over time, making recommendations, helping you structure your content, and creating earned media strategies. And then really getting into step 2 and 3 as it relates to looking at governance, how this is going to shape your organization, some of the work that Stefan talked about as we do organizational strategic plans, and even thinking about in our destination development plans, our brand strategies. We have this whole B to bot lens that we're adding to our approach and process. So if you'd like to reach out to Tom or I, our emails are up here. You can visit resonanceco.com for more info. We will be sharing a link to a recording of this presentation, so you'll all have it, and feel free to share that with your colleagues and team members. And if you'd like to reach out, we'd love to continue the conversation. As I said, this journey's only begun. And we're looking forward to helping destinations communities shape their future, not just from a brand perspective and a destination development perspective, but really from an overall image and how they're showing up in this whole new world that we've created. So thanks, everyone. Look forward to continuing the conversation and connecting in the days and weeks to come. Take care.